what I wanted to do is discuss a couple of ingredients that are in our HemoHIM supplement, which has a few people have asked about. And this is specifically the honey and corn syrup that's been added to the ingredients. So I'd like to explain, firstly, why and whether it's healthy or not. So first thing is, these are two ingredient lists that I pulled up. The first ingredient list, this is specifically from the Canadian website, and this supplement form is actually from the American website because I needed to actually find out the actual exact amount of the sugars that are in there. And different countries have different ways of listing the ingredients in their websites. And so in the Canadian website, all they show is that honey and corn syrup are in the non-medicinal ingredients. They list the amounts of the actual what we call the medicinal ingredients, like the herbs and the vitamins, etc. But the non-medicinal ingredients is kind of lumped together at the bottom. Honey, corn syrup, citric acid, gargum, sodium arginate, and distilled water. So I wanted to know exactly how much honey and corn syrup there was in each package. So I looked at the American website, which tends to have a different way of listing the ingredients. They actually have to list the exact carbohydrate, sugars, and protein content and all of that of their ingredients. So this is a little bit different. As you can see in the American website, total sugars in the one package of HemoHIM is 2.5 grams. And it says it includes 2 grams of added sugar. So that means the added sugar is the honey and the corn syrup. So out of a package of proprietary blend of the herbal extract, there's 10 grams, and 2 grams of it has been added sugars. Okay, and the vitamins and the B vitamins and the vitamin C, etc., will be negligible with respect to the weight. So 2 grams on top of the 10 grams of the added proprietary blend, so 2 grams per package, and that would be the honey and the corn syrup. So I want to firstly let you know why the sugars are added. As you can see under the other ingredients, the herbs, etc., and the water is the main ingredient, and the honey and the corn syrup is the one after water, which means there's very little amounts. But why do they do it? It's pretty obvious. Number one, why do they add honey and corn syrup? It's mainly for the taste. For most North Americans, people who aren't used to taking real herbs, let's say the Chinese herbs, the Korean herbs, etc., taste is a huge issue. When you actually take the HemoHIM, even with the added sugars, it has some strange taste because those are the taste of the actual herbs themselves, and you can't get rid of the taste because that's actually part of the active ingredients. So what Kolmar BnH, the manufacturer of HemoHIM, has decided we're going to add a little bit of sweetener in there just so that it's easier for most people to take this herb. And firstly, also too, you notice the HemoHIM is very thick. They try to take as much of the water out as possible so that it doesn't add to the weight of the product because it is still pretty heavy because it is liquid. And liquid herbs are the best herbs for function. So they always take into account how can they make the most functional product with the least amount of cost, least amount of weight, etc., without it affecting the function. So, and taste is huge because if it tastes horrible, people are not going to take it. If they don't take it, it does no good to anybody, right? So taste is hugely important. For most Asians, etc., that have had previous experience of real herbs, it's easy. I mean, HemoHIM tastes actually good, but for North Americans, it's going to be a hard taste to get used to. And this is why the honey and the corn syrup is added. But the thing is that, firstly, sweeteners, there's a whole bunch of different kind of sweeteners. And we need to figure out, okay, why did they use honey? Why did they use corn syrup? And the biggest, with these two products, honey and corn syrup are naturally occurring sugars with the least amount of processing involved. Um, and I'm going to explain what corn syrup is compared to what you know as high fructose corn syrup, which is what they use in other types of processed foods. So firstly, why do they use honey? Honey is actually a lot more expensive than sugar, all right? But they used honey first because it is the least processed of any sweetener. Um, and also, honey has a little bit more fructose in its composition than regular sugar, and so it's sweeter and with less volume. And white sugar has 50% fructose and 50% glucose and nothing else. But honey has other products in it like water, minerals such as iron, calcium, potassium, magnesium. So it's definitely overall healthier for us. And its sugar content is 40% fructose and 30% glucose. So it has higher fructose content overall. And so it's sweeter than the same amount of white sugar and with those other added ingredients, which are good for us, added minerals. And also, regular sugar has much higher glycemic index, which means it affects your blood sugar worse than honey, and therefore it tends to not shoot your blood sugar up as quick as honey would, which is great because you want blood sugar to go up slowly when you ingest something. And honey is already in its natural form as a liquid, and so it's less likely to crystallize when you mix it with other liquids like the herbs. So that's one reason why they use honey. But honey is less sweet than corn syrup. And so the thing is, they use a certain amount of honey, but then they add it up to corn syrup so that you can minimize the weight of the product. It's really important to keep things as light as possible without reducing the effectiveness. And if you actually lifted up a box of HemoHIM, it's pretty heavy. So even a tiny little extra weight can make a big difference with each of the packages. So firstly, you need to know what corn syrup is. Most people, when they hear corn syrup, they automatically assume it's bad for you, but that's not true. It's high fructose corn syrup. That's the evil one. And so, what is corn syrup? Corn syrup is nothing more than the carbohydrates or the sugar in corn. Table sugar, the white sugar, is the sugar they process from sugar cane, which is another plant. So corn syrup is just the sugar of corn. So when you eat corn, there's sugar in there, and that is really what corn syrup is. It's just extracted sugar. So that sugar is 100% glucose, which is sugar that our body can use immediately. Corn syrup dissolves really well in liquids, and it doesn't crystallize like many other sweeteners. And this is why it's critical that they use it in the HemoHIM, because the HemoHIM, even though it's thick, it's a liquid. So they need to make sure it doesn't get hard and crystallize. And it's actually used a lot in making candy and shiny sweet sauces. So it's used a lot in baking, sweets. Corn syrup is often used in combination with regular sugar to give a creamier texture to frozen desserts like ice cream and sorbet. And a lot of bakers use small amounts of this in batches of cookies or brownies to make the cookie or brownie more creamy and consistent. Okay, so it has different properties than regular sugar, but it is purely natural. So where do you find corn syrup? You most likely find corn syrup in the baking aisle of your grocery store, alongside regular white sugar, brown sugar, molasses, and maple syrup, because these are all sweeteners that we would use when we're making cakes or cookies or whatever. So they're natural sweeteners. And these are some of the brands. You would see Caro, regular corn syrup, and no-name brands. But again, they're all used for typically baking and making sweets. So now the key is, what is high fructose corn syrup? This is the biggest actually additive in almost all of processed foods. And this is not something you find in nature, which means it is actually man-made. So what high fructose corn syrup is exactly that. There's actually fructose in they've taken corn syrup and they've actually converted the glucose, because true corn syrup is only glucose. But they've taken corn syrup and they've actually modified some of that glucose into fructose. So now there's high amounts of fructose and less glucose in this particular modified sugar. So this is not something you find in nature. And so HFCS, the short form for high fructose corn syrup, has some of this glucose from the natural corn syrup that we would have used, in baking, etc., and convert to fructose using certain enzymes. Why did they do this? Well, a couple of reasons. Fructose is much sweeter than glucose alone, which means in the same amount of corn syrup, the high fructose corn syrup is much sweeter because now it has fructose in it, and therefore they need to use less of it. And so you do not find high fructose corn syrup in the baking aisle because that's not something we would use for our baking purposes. It's only used in commercially processed foods and soft drinks. And it's much cheaper and cost effective than using sucrose, which is your traditional sugar, which is found in that nature. So what happens is that almost all the processed foods, especially the soft drinks, have this high fructose corn syrup in it. There's only a few soft drinks that doesn't have it. One of them is like ginger ale. So that's the only soft drink that I would allow my daughter to drink occasionally on the weekends. And I like it too. So it's a refreshing drink once in a while. But the high fructose corn syrup is in almost every other drinks, especially Coke. Okay. So why is this so bad for us? It has so many functions. It's the amount of fructose you get in one ingestion that's the problem. When you have too much fructose is not a sugar your body can use as is. When you have glucose, it gets absorbed immediately and your body can use it for fuel, burn it, etc. But when you eat fructose, it actually has to go to the liver and it has to be converted into glucose, and then it's able to be used by the cells in your body. So there's a lot of different functions, a lot of different conditions that high fructose corn syrup can cause if you ingest too much of it. For instance, it increases your bad cholesterol, leading to fat accumulation around your organs and potential heart disease, increases your uric acid levels, so it can cause gout and high blood pressure. It can cause depositions of fat in the liver, potentially leading to non-alcoholic fatty liver. This is probably the number one cause of fatty liver nowadays for people who's been ingesting way too much processed food, especially the drinks. Causes insulin resistance, which can lead to obesity and type 2 diabetes. And fructose doesn't suppress your appetite as much as glucose does. So, you may keep eating even though you're full. And excess fructose can cause leptin resistance, which disturbs the way your body processes or breaks down fat. So again, it contributes to obesity. But this is different. You know that fructose is found in fruit. Fructose from added sugars is bad for you, but fructose from fruit is not. The reason being is that fruits aren't just bags of fructose. They're real foods with a low caloric density and lots of fiber. And they're hard to overeat. And you would have to eat a lot of it to reach the kind of harmful levels of fructose you would get from, let's say, one can of Coke. So in general, fruit is a minor source of fructose in the diet compared to added sugars. And the harmful effects of fructose apply to typically the Western diet, supplying excessive calories and added sugars with absolutely no nutritional value. So it doesn't apply to the natural sugars you find in fruits and vegetables. When you look at more of the traditional diets and Asian diets, there's a lot of wheat fruit, vegetables, etc. And the little bit of fructose you get in, let's say, an apple gets converted very easily by the liver to glucose, and it's used up. And all the fiber in the apple, etc., allows the fructose to go into your bloodstream very, very slowly. But when you get a can of Coke with 30 grams of sugar in there, most of it is from fructose. It gets absorbed very quickly and it overloads the liver because it has to actually convert all of that into glucose. So that ends the explanation of why honey and fruit and corn syrup is added and why it is not bad for you. So this is key because the average person doesn't know the difference between corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup.